This is a conversation with Raja Selvam. Hi, Raja.
Hello, Serge.
So, Raja, you have developed an approach called ISP. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
I would be glad to, Serge. ISP stands for Integral Somatic Psychotherapy, and what it is about, I can say briefly. I've been teaching for a long time, body-based approaches to psychological work. That is, to how to make psychological work more effective and efficient by bringing in the body and its awareness more than it is usual in mainstream Western psychology. And through my experience of working with people and teaching a large number of trainings in many, many countries, I come to a place where I realize that it is not enough to just address the physical body, the only body that science recognizes as the source of experience. It's also important to address the quantum body, or what cannot be measured by science in a comparable way to quantum, particles in quantum physics. Now, this body is called the subtle body in the East, and I'm also trained in Eastern psychology, and I find parallels in quantum physics, and therefore I have been using, I've been bringing that into the approach as well, and I find more effectiveness when these two bodies are addressed simultaneously as a combined source of all of our experiences, thinking, feeling, remembering, acting and connecting and relating and so on. So, and in addition, once we go that far, it is also important to bring in the dimension of consciousness. In Western psychology, there are several approaches that bring the body in. There are some approaches that bring energy in, such as the approach of thought field therapy, which is meridian-based, and there are other approaches that bring consciousness in. Almost all the mindfulness approaches bring consciousness in. So I thought that it would be better to bring all three in and find simple ways to teach clinicians in different orientations so that they can bring these three dimensions into their own practice without having to change the theoretical basis that they come from in order to do the work. For example,
so Raja, let me maybe interrupt you for a moment, because there's a lot in there. And so,
yes.
So we're talking about, just integrating, paying attention to the body as a gateway to dealing with psychological phenomena. We're talking about consciousness, but specifically when you were talking about the body, you make a distinction between the subtle body, the quantum body, versus the body in everyday experience. So maybe can we stay with that a little bit more, about this subtle body, this quantum body?
Yes. In Eastern psychology, it is not just the physical body alone that contributes to experience. There is also the subtle body, and this subtle body is also believed to go from one life to the next. And whether it does that or not, it's moot point. Nobody can really prove it to be true or not true. The question is, can it be brought under one's awareness and be used? And that's what many energy psychologists do. And the question is, what is the subtle body? Is it a body of matter? Of course, it's a body of matter. Everything is matter, so it's a subtle matter, so comparable to the quantum phenomena in quantum physics. And when people in the East talk about chakras and elements, they're really talking about their intuitive understanding, their awareness of the body on the quantum level. And whether it's a different body or the same body is not particularly of importance, as long as we can also observe the phenomenon, through awareness and see what role it plays in making the work that we do better.
Yeah, so what we're talking about then is not having a debate on, theoretical existence or not of this quantum body, this subtle body, but you're talking about having the experience, the awareness of it.
Exactly. And that is easier than establish the finality of the truth of it or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for example, we find that when people are not able to physically be aware of the lower part of their leg, from the knee down, yeah, when they're not able to do that, they're not able to deepen into the feelings. Conversely, we find that when people deepen into the feelings, the lower leg is more open, and the feelings are more stable. Yeah, there is a change in the physical body itself in terms of the tone of the musculature there, but also there's a great deal of flow, of fluidity, of water-like energy or air-like energy, and that makes sense from the Eastern point of view. So, if, for example, we're working with feelings in the heart, and people are having a great deal of difficulty with the feeling and feeling the feeling or tolerating the feeling, it makes a lot of sense to open up the legs. And when we do that, people come more into their feelings, so they're able to tolerate them better, and they're able to get even more insight into what they feel. So to do that, we need to work with the physical body there, the musculature there, the ligaments there, the bones there, through simple movement that almost any clinician can do. And then it also requires, a belief and awareness of the flow of energy that can be felt as water or air. Now, it doesn't have to be the truth. What we're saying is that whether there's something called the subtle body energy is not the matter. There's a model, and when people follow that, they seem to get much better. So, like acupuncture.
So I want to just, again, slow down this a little bit. And so what I'm hearing, what I'm understanding is you're talking is that sense that the effect of paying attention to this subtle body is going to actually be noticeable in, for instance, a flow of, the way emotions, the way feelings flow, the way but you get to it through paying attention to the physicality of the body. So in some way, what you're doing could be seen by an outside observer as paying attention to the physicality of the body and something happens. But there is something more to it, that you're doing it within the context of a narrative, of a conceptualization, where what you're doing is not just paying attention to the physical body, but acting on the subtle body.
Exactly, because the quality of it is different. And unless we also look for those qualities, we end up tracking just body sensations. And feelings, for example, which are often the most important things that we work with in psychotherapy. The conventional wisdom is that almost all of pathologies derive from the inability to feel and tolerate certain states, often affective states. Not always, but most of the time. And affective states are complex sensations on the physical body, of the physical level, and they flow of, complex energy states at the subtle level. And the interaction of the two is a complex experience. And when people track individual sensations in sensation tracking systems, they often miss the forest for the trees. And that is one of the weaknesses of sensation tracking systems. So we have to be able to track more and more system-wide experiences, either at the level of sensations or at the level of energy, in order to make psychological experiences more meaningful in tracking the body or energy.
Right. So when you are focused on tracking sensation, what could happen is you miss the forest for the tree. So how is it in practice, in a session, how is it that you can actually manage to track this flow that's more subtle?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, tracking sensations, individual sensations, is an important step. Mm-hmm. It's like learning the alphabet of the language of the body. Yeah. Heat and cold and constriction and expansion in certain areas of the body. Just sensing that establishes a better feedback loop between the brain and the body in order to regulate the body. So that when we send more complex phenomena there, we're actually able to sense it and regulate the physiology while we're having these complex experiences. So for that reason, I don't even ask people what they're sensing. For the simple reason that if they're used to sensing, they go back to sensing heat and cold and constriction and expansion, tingling, etc. I first go to the psychological experience. I say, I'm looking at the psychological situation and I'm mirroring, exploring what feeling states there are reasonably, that could be reasonably expected if they don't already show them on their faces or already report them in their awareness. Then I have them sense in the body those feeling states, where it is, how it is. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the more intense the feeling, we know that from the work of Candace Burt, an emotional experience cascades through all the cells of the body in a matter of seconds. And the more the intense an experience is, the more it involves the whole organism. And in therapy, people often report feelings in the heart and above the diaphragm, and they emote through the mouth. So very often it gets stuck above the diaphragm. And one way to work with the feeling state, to sense it more completely and to tolerate it, is to open up the body as much as possible, either through awareness or through movement or touch in different directions. And when we do that, they have a fuller experience and a greater ability to tolerate the feeling. And if they don't go below the diaphragm, it's very hard to get into the unconscious. The second chakra, for example, in Eastern psychology, the element of water, is a source of the unconscious. It's where it's a source of regeneration as well as the gateway to the unconscious. So very often when people are just sensing the heart area, if they sense the heart area at all, when they're processing emotions, very often they process emotions created in the brain. And if they don't go below, then they might end up in this prolonged process of many associations on a conscious level, but they're not really getting into the deeper patterns and feelings that might be there in the unconscious that the psyche is resisting against.
So just again, to slow down a little bit. What I'm hearing is something about one is that you're not going to start with sensation, but actually with something that's more all-encompassing, the feeling.
The experience.
The experience.
Yeah, the psychological situation, the experience, and then where is it in the body?
And then where is it in the body? And as you go,
where is it not?
Yeah, but as opposed to starting from the sensation, because that would be maybe constricting it to the trees.
Yeah, it might be, and especially people who are especially good at tracking sensations get lost. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'll give an example. I've had people who come to me who have done years of tracking sensations, and they have anxiety. And anxiety ultimately can be managed. One, if it's based on fear of something, is to feel the fear as much as possible and tolerate it and hold it so that it doesn't get projected on something else as cause on the outside. But as soon as they haven't just sensed the fear where it is and where it is not, and whether they can move their arms so that it could also be felt in that area, people start tracking sensations like tingling here or warmth there, and they just go away from the psychological situation and the feeling, which is really a complex sensation across multiple multiple systems in the body. They get away from by just tracking sensations in one area or the other. So over time, I've learned not to ask them to track, sensations. And in the trainings that I do, I'm of course teaching it only for experienced clinicians. I require that they are experienced clinicians who are working psychologically, who have been working psychologically for a long time. And I'm also requiring that they have adequate knowledge of the body through somatic experiencing or bioenergetics or vipassana or some system. They already know the body. So it's not unfamiliar for them to sense sensations and have connection to different parts of the body. So I want to build on that, and if I were to add some of the sensations, they will get lost in the routine of what they normally do. So I go to, for example, I grieve. I just say, where is the grief in the body? And where is it not? And why didn't you put your hand on the diaphragm? Because you tell me it's not below the diaphragm, to see whether the diaphragm can open up and it could also flow into the rest of the body, or move your neck so that it can also come into your face, and then or the arms so that it can flow and it can open into the heart meridian, and so on. So this way, I just avoid having people people who are familiar with tracking sensation not to track sensation.
Right,
so that we can
right.
remain on the most important, difficult aspect of experience.
So that you're talking about the experience as a whole, and from there, the curiosity about where it is, where it's not, and that's where the tracking takes place within this context.
Yeah, and then the next step is, how do we, is there a logic to the direction in which we expand the experience of the body? And that is where the chakra theory, especially polarity therapy, can be very useful, because polarity therapy identifies, for example, different zones of the physical body when they're constricted, prevents the flow of the energy from moving through. For example, the heart chakra energy will not flow through the body. For example, if the large intestine area, kidney area, and the lower leg area are blocked in some way. So we find that then as we work with the chest area through movement or awareness or touch, which is often an easier way to open them up and to sense them, we also work with touch or awareness, the large intestine, the kidney area, and the lower leg area, and we find that people can much more easily come into feelings, and the feelings are relevant to the situation they are in, and that way, there's a logic to the direction in which we expand. For example, if somebody has a lot of anxiety, then it makes a lot of sense to open, for example, the arms or work at the knees from the same perspective, because we don't. That when we open the body up and pay attention to the psychological experience, the experience can get intense. But can we open it in such a way that it regulates the body more? And this is where, this is where science can provide a great deal of help. And how do we open up the body in such a way that the autonomic nervous system can regulate better? Or how can we open up the body in such a way so that the subtle body can regulate itself better and relate itself better to the physical body? So there is a logic too in the direction in which we expand the physical body.
Right. But
it has to be simple enough. No? Otherwise, psychotherapists with different disciplines cannot quite get into it. Yeah. And it has to be also such that it's not so odd for them, out of the frame of reference for them to work this way.
So Raja, what you're talking about is the context is that energy can get stuck, and we're talking about is in order to get the energy flowing, and that this flow actually allows for a process of regulation to take place. You have to have a roadmap of what the various circuits are and how the energy can flow and in which direction and what to do in order to facilitate this flow.
Exactly, and it has to be simple enough so that clinicians can use it across different orientations. But it's not just at the level of the subtle body and its connection to the physical body. In the physical body itself, the more we can facilitate nervous system flows, back and forth nervous system flows in the autonomic nervous system, so that the information from the areas served by the autonomic nervous system, organs, glands, and blood vessels gets to the brain, and the information from brain gets to these areas so that the brain can regulate these areas better and use these areas to generate experiences better, and also along the somatic nervous system pathway so that the muscles can be sensed better but also regulated better or used to generate experiences better. So how do we do that in the physical body itself, across the 3 layers of the physical body? So there are certain simple ways to facilitate the flows, and that's what we've used actually with great effectiveness among tsunami survivors in India after the 2004 tsunami.
Yes.
On which we have written an article, but also now in a 3-year project in Sri Lanka, we are involved in where we are training 160 counselors to treat post-traumatic stress disorder from the war, civil war of 30 years that just ended 2 years ago. We're using these simple roadmaps, not necessarily working there with energy, but subtle body. We're working there more with the physical body, how to facilitate flows, so that when people have these terrible experiences, the more physiology is open in order to tolerate it, so that one part of the physiology doesn't get too dysregulated, and they can also tolerate it more and work it through.
Yes, so restoring the regulation of the flow in the physical body is that gateway that you use.
And I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. After the tsunami, there was a 10-year-old boy who came to us, and he said, at the end of the work in the village, he said he didn't even know English. He took the hands of a therapist and put her hand on his chest and said, "Tsunami, thump, thump, thump." Like fear. So, and what we taught him to do is as simple as this. We said, yeah, it is scary, and the body can get charged like an electric charge, and the body can get hardened, and fear and charge gets all stuck in the chest, and it dysregulates the heart. So we'll teach you how to not go away from the fear, but find a way to make a bigger space for it, so that the body doesn't harden and your heart doesn't go pitter-patter. And what we taught him was to put his hand on the chest, and then also to move his left arm and the right arm, and to sense that as those areas opened up, he could feel more anxiety in his arms, more sensations in his arms, and the relief started to come to the chest area, and then it slowly spread to other areas, not many areas, but it went a little bit into the legs. And we said, this is what you need to do when you hear of a tsunami rumor, or you remember the tsunami, when your heart starts to do that. You put your hand on your heart, chest, and you move the arms and maybe the legs, and see how the fear can go into larger space in your body and not scare you so much in the heart that it becomes dysregulated. And we interviewed him, 4 weeks later and 8 months later, and he was doing fine. He said that he had not had that symptom. He was able to manage. I hope that gives you an idea.
Now that's a beautiful example. And in a way, what I'd like to do with you right now is do as if we had, in a way, a video of it and do an instant replay. And since we don't have a video and we can't have a commentary on the video, maybe I'm going to suggest to people as they're listening to when you're going to replay this a little bit in a short form, to pay attention to the various layers that you're talking about. There is something where the underlying concept is that sense of, yes, some experiences are really overwhelming, and there is a way to deal with them that you can actually put them in a larger container that they can be, digested. Then, yes, there was one thing there. Then the other part where you're actually explaining a method and paying attention, to something about as the little kid is taught to move his arm and to observe something. And there is the very, the simplicity of what it is that you're showing him so that it's something that can be carried through. So I'd like to invite you to, maybe restate briefly this example, so we can hear it again, within the context of seeing these many layers.
Can I give you another example?
Sure.
Even clear. There's a young woman in the Netherlands who came to see me, and her symptom was that from the age of 7, she's had panic attacks with the slightly psychotic, auditory hallucination. Let's say her name is Petra, and the voice said to a 7-year-old from the abdomen, "Petra, it's time for you to die," and she would have panic attacks. She was so scared by it, she wouldn't even tell her parents, the only child, till she was 10 years old. And then when she did, then they tried to get help. And, psychoanalysis, psychiatry. By the time she came to see me, she was quite depressed. She was on multiple medications, didn't have hope anything could change. She had dropped out of college, and she was sleeping about 12 to 13 hours a day. And so, we immediately pieced together as a hypothesis that this abdominal location might have to do with 2 postnatal surgeries she had as soon as she was born for correcting some congenital defects in the alimentary canal. And the psychoanalyst had pointed it out as a source, so it was an easy hypothesis to come to. So I taught her how to prevent stress from accumulating to a point where it crosses over a threshold and leads to a panic attack. So I had a talk about something that was stressful in her life, and we could then see how the physical body started to constrict around the abdomen. Yeah, and then I had to put a hand there, and immediately, without going deeper into the feeling, while being aware of it, also to move the legs a little bit so that we could not only open the physical body to the ground, but also the energy, from that area to flow into the legs. And she was able to do that. And surprisingly, there was no fear. And then we had her sense how that actually reduced stress throughout the body. And that was exercise. And I told her to do that every day as soon as she sensed a little bit of stress started to accumulate, especially in the abdomen. She came back a week later, said, and you won't believe it, a lifelong serious constipation symptom where she could only eliminate once a week with difficulty had disappeared. And that we thought was fantastic because she could somehow find self-regulation by regulating a body, in the direction where it made sense to expand it. And then, of course, in the second session, a week later, there was so much terror. It was excessive. It was almost like she was decompensating, but we knew what to do. What we did was we moved the arms, we moved the neck to move the energy up. We put the hand on the diaphragm. She did it so that it could go into the rest of the body. And then she said, my whole body is in fear. Then we want to give it a distance. I'm not afraid. My whole body is in fear. We somehow managed to do that at a high level of arousal and fear. And believe it or not, and we don't know what would happen. She could have gone in any way. And she stopped having panic attacks. She was able to come back from panic attacks. And she was a determined soul. She had had enough of being constrained in life. And then I did one piece of work with her where I just had her hold grief and spread it and tolerate it. And at that point she said, I have a lot of energy coming and I keep kind of trying to eliminate it. Then I realized that's a life force. It's reasserting itself. To cut the long story short, she's actually on her own. She's finished college. She has a great relationship. And she actually told me to write an article about it so that I could use her name. She wanted everybody to know. So I thought that it's a combination there. We were not only opening the physical body up, but in the process we were also opening the energy body up. Yeah. And then somehow in the combination, she survived miraculously. And not only she's thriving. And that's a dramatic example, but I can give you other examples too, and it doesn't surprise me, actually.
Yeah.
When we don't bring the body in, the energy in, and the regulating forces of each body and the interaction between the two in psychology, we are processing from, like neck up.
Right.
And or at best we are processing from, like diaphragm up. But it's really limited, because all the chakras or the energy points that have to do with deep unconscious forces are in the pelvis or in the abdomen, So unless those energies are brought in, the processes don't go deep. They just then follow whatever psychological theoretical framework that the therapist happens to be using. So
there's the depth that you're talking about, but there's also, what strikes me is also a sense of the practicality and the connection. That, for instance, in the example that you just mentioned with Petra, what strikes me, what it brings up for me, is that sense of, we would all say that when confronted with fear, we human beings have a tendency to kind of tighten, to close up, and to that it's just in a way the physiological reaction, but also a way to avoid that experience. And you are showing her a simple way to actually open up so that there is flow in a way that she can feel the fear but not be paralyzed by it.
And not discharge the energy. See, one of the oldest rules in psychoanalysis is affect tolerance, building affect tolerance. And the whole field is going away from it toward getting rid of affect, discharging energies and the like. And, we cannot prevent from people from having traumas and difficult experiences, right? And if we can teach them that it's okay to experience these things, but in a wise way, use the whole organism to, sense, regulate, and tolerate an overwhelming experience. When people learn that, they're also resilient in future situations. I believe a great deal in educating people about how these two bodies are related to the psychology, and how the psychology needs support on the one hand and regulation on the other hand in the physical and subtle bodies. And it has to be done in a simple way. I had 2 PhDs. My first PhD is in business, in marketing, and the second PhD is in clinical psychology, depth psychology, with the depth of psychology emphasis. And I know that unless a system, an approach is taught in a simple way and it can be easily adopted, it's not going to go anywhere. For example, the earliest body psychotherapy systems suffered from that. For a non-body oriented psychotherapist, the intervention seemed too outlandish and not, and it wasn't clear how. Therefore, it never got off the ground. Whereas if people understand, a psychoanalyst understands how they're working with emotions, they're working with difficult experiences, then we are only saying, hey, how are the difficult emotions are in the body, arise in the body, and how can you, if it shuts down, open it up without having to do anything out of the ordinary other than awareness of self-touch and movement, then it's easier for them to, implement it without having to give up their primary orientation, whether they are a Kleinian psychoanalyst or a Jungian psychoanalyst or a bioenergetics therapist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's the missing link, that making that possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard, and that's my experience, because if my experience with tsunami survivors and war survivors in India and Sri Lanka respectively are any guide, and if my experiences with treating people, and I've taught in as many as 16 countries, is any guide, then I think it is actually doable, and it's very exciting because the quantum physics is showing the way in terms, it hasn't quite transferred over to the psychology in terms of the deeper levels of the physical body. We could just call the subtle body just deeper levels of the physical body at the atomic level that we don't study, because we can only see what we see in brain scans of the cells that are, can be microscopically or electronically observed, but we cannot observe the quarks and other subatomic particles that in macrophysics, you can do considerable, experiments involving experiments deep under the ground, only infer from observations of particles for a millionth of a second the existence of other particles. But what we know from Eastern psychology is that it's subject to awareness. And as long as psychology continues to believe, if it does, that awareness is a function of the physical brain at the gross level, then I think that they're missing a point. And hopefully, as the quantum physics findings from macrophysics filter over to the microphysics of the body, we will be more at ease with the subtle body as a quantum level body, or even if it's not a separate body. The Eastern psychology says there's a physical body and a quantum level of the physical body, but there's also a subtle body which is also a quantum level body. It's of the same matter as the quantum level of the physical body. That's how they view it. But it doesn't matter. As psychologists, we are only interested in phenomenology, right? Mm-hmm. Whether phenomena brought under awareness helps people to heal. Whether the model itself is a myth or a metaphor, as long as it helps, I think that we should seriously, adopt it. Especially when we have great outcomes from it.
Right. So in a way, that also the similarity with quantum physics is it can be looked at as something that's incredibly theoretical and abstract, but then from time to time there's some experiments which actually show that there is a correspondence between the theory and what happens. And in a sense, it's not necessarily a proof that it's absolute truth, but certainly an indication that it makes sense to use this narrative in order to work this way.
Yes. And even if its awareness is a function of the matter, as science hypothesizes now, without any proof, if we have quantum level body, then it could be a product of the quantum level body. Eastern psychology says it is not. It's beyond that. But it doesn't matter, no? I think we can suppose it's at the quantum level without violating the laws of science or the hypotheses and still get a lot of benefit out of it.
Great. Well, Raja, that was a pleasure. Thank you. Is there anything you might want to add to conclude, or does it feel like a right place to end?
I think it's a great place to end, and I really enjoyed the interview, and I really thank you. Yeah, so I hope that in the next, in the years to come, that psychology is more integrated. That is, regardless of the model people are using, whether they're using a developmental theory or some other theory, it doesn't matter. Regardless of theory, they work with difficult experience. And the difficult experience is a function of the body, not just the brain, that we know. And the question, we can dispute how many bodies there are, but as long as the whole body is brought into the equation as something that generates experience and can actually tolerate experience when you open it up, if it's blocked and shut down, then I think that we need to go in the direction of it. And I think it's very exciting, and especially when the subtle body can also be brought in, or if not the subtle body, the quantum level of the physical body, if you want to look at it that way, is brought in. And that's the frontier that I'm really enjoying working in. And I think it'll keep me busy for the rest of my life.
This recording is part of the Somatic Mindfulness and Relational Psychotherapy podcast. See the website relationalimplicit.com.
It's a function of the body, not just the brain, that we know. And the question, we can dispute how many bodies there are, but as long as the whole body is brought into the equation as something that generates experience and can actually tolerate experience when you open it up, if it's blocked and shut down, then I think that we need to go in the direction of it. And I think it's very exciting, and especially when the subtle body can also be brought in, or if not the subtle body, the quantum level of the physical body, if you want to look at it that way, is brought in. And that's the frontier that I'm really enjoying working in. And I think it'll keep me busy for the rest of my life.
This recording is part of the Proactive Mindfulness podcast. We explore how to be more present and engaged in our lives and how to make lasting change. This is a contemporary take on mindfulness informed by embodied therapy and the polyvagal theory. You can find more articles and videos on the website proactivemindfulness.com.